Matt, the head of, is it Mattrified or Metrified? I've always been wanted to ask that question.
It is Mattrified.
Mattrified. Okay, so you are the creator of Merfight. You are a indie developer. Um, First, well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, of course, and the developer segment of the podcast. So please, if you could just tell everyone who you are outside of what I just said about you.
Um, I'm Matt or Mattrified. I'm a game dev, both professionally, and I also do a lot of indie side project stuff. A big fighting game fan. It's probably my favorite genre to do development for in my spare time. But I also do a lot of. I've done mobile. I've done a little VR. I've done um, visual novel work. So I've done a variety of game types throughout my career, which is now almost at 14 years um, in Pittsburgh. And yeah, that's really about it. To I like to create things, and I like to especially see players kind of break things and work with my games in ways that I'm not expecting.
Mhm.
That's always fun to see.
That's an interesting take because I know there's a lot of developers that hate that. They're like, "Why are you trying to break my game?" And it's nice to see that other developers like, "Yeah, let's see how I can." Is it because you want to fix it or you want to learn from it?
It's a little of both. Like,
Okay.
there's obviously, like, depending how they break it. So there's one like, oh, the game crashed. It's like, well, I have to fix that, obviously. But if it's like, oh, I'm putting together this character's kit in a way that I didn't design, sometimes it's like, oh, that's actually really cool. I'm just gonna keep it, and maybe I'll put it in a challenge combo or add it to the tutorial or something.
Hmm.
And other times it's like, okay, yes, that is very cheap, and I need to address it in the next build. But it is always interesting to see that stuff.
I gotta say, the first couple times I played Merfight, I bought it the day it came out, right? And I remember I was talking to some of my friends about it. Your AI was really hard for me to defeat. I don't know if that was a bug or it was the first time in an indie game in a long time that I actually struggled against the AI, which I actually was really thankful you did that. Because other indies it just felt like there were pushovers until you get to the final boss and then you just get destroyed. But like I felt like I needed to learn combos going into it, and it was a nice challenge I haven't seen in a long time in any type of fighting game. So it was nice to see like the AI being a challenge again because I kind of feel like that's been lost, especially with the AAA companies recently.
Well, the funny thing is, I actually hate programming AI. I
Okay.
find it very tedious, and I'm not a fan. Like, I don't like doing it, and it's not that I don't like doing it; it's that I haven't really found like the approach to do it really well and efficiently. So Merfights is just very like, yeah, it just does everything really perfectly, and it like knows how to block a lot of stuff really well. So it's definitely very temp. I just wanted something in the game so that if you play arcade or story mode content, that it at least works. Um, that was sort of my goal with it. So I definitely am going to improve it, but definitely like I want the challenging AI to still be challenging for sure.
Hmm.
So that's definitely my goal for that. But yeah, AI is definitely one of the areas in fighting games that are very difficult for me to do, and I think difficult in general because there's that balance between do I make it just like super intelligent supercomputer, because I mean that's what it pretty much is, or like you have to do all this faking to make it feel more human, and that's challenging. I mean,
I
AI
would imagine.
programming is its yeah, AI programming is its own field for some people. So
Yeah.
like, it's not as someone trying to do everything in one game, it's pretty difficult to make sure like I have good human feeling AI. So that's definitely been a challenge.
All right. All right. So speaking of development, so I guess before I go into what's your development origin story, you already mentioned you like creating. Was this something you always knew you wanted to do, or was this something that like you got into and like you know what, this is it? Or like, how did that come about?
So I know early on I always wanted to do game design of some sort. Like ever since I started playing games, it was whether it was drawing Sonic level designs or even Lemmings level designs, and there was a period where I was just drawing a bunch of like fighting game character designs. Uh it definitely was something I always wanted to do. And it was always a challenge because I know like back in the 90s, it was very like, you gotta move to Japan if you want to make games. Like that's what it felt like people were saying, or it was
Hmm.
like very difficult. But fortunately, obviously, the barriers have lowered a lot since then. Um, but yeah, I definitely knew I always wanted to do some kind of creative field, whether that was writing or art. But when I learned that like, oh, game design is a viable field I can try and do, that's when I started looking into that more.
All right. So like, did you do everything right off the bat by yourself, or did you like jump on board with a company? Like, I guess the question is, what's your development origin story now? Like, how do we get to Mattrified now?
Well, I went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, which no longer exists, so that's always fun to put on a resume.
Okay.
They had a game art and design program, which I graduated from, and then I interned at a small company in Pittsburgh called SimOps, and they were doing a lot of simulation work, and they also had their own game engine that was called Wild Pockets, and that was like a browser-based game engine. And then I got hired at Shell Games in Pittsburgh, and I've been working there for the past 13 and a half years. Um, so that's sort of how that started. And that, and then for fighting game stuff, it really was just like, okay, I'm in college. I learned how to program some stuff, and I was working in Game Maker, and I just was like, I'm going to try to make my own Mugen style thing so I can just, make whatever. Because that was actually, I would say that would actually the real origin was just messing around with that in like high school and stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, those little character editors and things, and getting a virus from downloading a character sheet from Russia or something.
Yeah. I think it's like a rite of passage for a lot of fighting game fans is trying to create your own Mugen. Like I even have done it at a certain point. Like I ripped off, like I was trying to make Marvel versus DC at one point in Mugen, and I do remember vaguely having to factory reset my computer after trying it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was I really wanted Rogue in the game, and I just couldn't find the right like Marvel versus Capcom 2 model, and it was driving me up a wall.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was, I would say the Mugen experimentation was definitely the true origin story for sure, and then it kind of just went from there.
Mm-hmm. Was there any like when you I guess started making your own Mugen? Was it like was it a creation of something that you already had in mind, or was it you just trying to expand a roster? Like, can you give me some idea of like what kind of game you were creating with Mugen back then, or do you even remember?
Oh gosh, honestly, I had so little time to really dedicate it. It was just like, let me see if I can like get a character working the way I want. Like just like give Sean from Street Fighter 3 a new move, and like let's just see what I can do. So I like didn't even really get very far with any of it. I just was kind of learning. Like it was more like learning the art of it. Like, oh, this is how sprite art can work and how it looks and how they do palettes, and more like learning about like, oh, this is how collisions are working and things like that in one aspect. But I never got really far with like, oh, here's a full game with all these characters that I want to make, because my whole thing was like, oh, I'd always wanted to do it all from scratch, like make my own thing 100%. So it was just messing around with existing stuff to kind of learn. For sure.
All right, so you said you worked for was it the Shell company? What was the name of that company?
No, Shell Games.
Shell Games. What could you give me some ideas of the games that they've created?
It's a really broad spectrum for sure. It's kind of like what I mentioned earlier. Is like I did a visual novel there, some VR stuff. What else? Mobile. My first game there was like an unpublished Wii game for 4-year-olds. So like a really broad. I even did some Flash stuff when Flash was still a thing. So it's been a broad spectrum for sure.
Okay, good stuff. I am very curious about Battle High with you. So can you give me what was your experiences making that?
No, Battle High was kind of interesting because the way that started is I had done a fighting game prototype for Game Maker, and back when they still had like a public website where you could like upload games and stuff. I remember I was using like sprites from Rage of the Dragons with, I think the character was like Annie or something, and I guess the team liked the prototype that I had worked on, and they sent me a message. They're like, "Oh, we're working on this game. Do you want to help us out?" Problem is, I didn't get that message for about 6 months after they sent it. So by the time I was like, "Sure, I'm interested," they were like, "Oh, we're halfway done, but we need help with alternate palette colors. So I wrote this horrible system for swap colors that was super slow and bad in retrospect. But I had done that. And then around when they finished the Game Maker release and they were just like, oh, cool, it's out, people can play it and they like it. The ID at Xbox, not ID at Xbox, the indie Xbox arcade games service was like just starting for Xbox 360, which was like, oh, you pay $100 and then you can make a game and get it on an Xbox 360.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you didn't get achievements for it or anything, but it was still nice to get a game on a console. So I just was like, hey, we have all the art done. I know how to program XNA, which was the sort of framework you had to use for that. It was like, why don't I just port the game from Game Maker to C# XNA? And the team was like, sure, that sounds cool. So I did that. And like, you know, whatever. It was, I mean, it was Xbox Live indie game, so it didn't do amazing. It didn't even have online. So I had to figure that out, or I never got a chance to figure that out. I wish I did. And then we were like, oh, let's add more characters. So we added like 5 characters, and we did Battle High 2. And then around that time, the team kind of dissipated. Point 5 Projects was the original team, and the original IP holder. I was like, oh, I'd still like to work on this. Are you cool with that? And he was like, yeah, you know what? I don't have time to really dedicate to making sprites anymore. But he's like, you can do whatever you want with it. It was almost like I adopted it in a way. Like I still don't technically own Battle High as an IP, but like the original developer is like, yeah, just like if you're gonna do stuff, run it by me, or like obviously I can't be like I killed half the cast and now Battle High 3. Like he'd probably be upset if I did that.
Yeah.
But like as long as it's sort of like, oh, okay, you're just keeping me in the loop that you're doing a new thing with it. Cool. So that's kind of just been the thing, and then it went from Xbox 360, and then I put it on the Ouya when that was a thing, and then I eventually, and the funniest thing with that is that eventually there was a Razer micro console. Someone had helped me actually translate Battle High to Chinese, so it could go on that Razer micro console.
I don't even know what like the Razer Motorola, like the phone.
No, it was just like a small console. It might have just, I don't even know where it was released, if at all. But so that was that, and then I eventually got it on Xbox One through the ID at Xbox program. So it's just been kind of rehashing that game and porting it from Game Maker to XNA to Unity. Yeah, so that was definitely interesting, and I still want to do another update because like the original Game Maker version actually had like tag in it. It was a tag fighting game. And I really kind of want to bring that back, and there's a lot of lessons learned from both the first attempt at it and Merfight that I was like, yeah, I'd really like to improve a lot of stuff in this game when I re-release it, or if I re-release it, because it's definitely something I'd like to do.
Is there a chance, I guess, for Battle High 3? Is that actually a possibility?
Well, the next thing I would do is I would want to do another just like goofy add a word to the subtitle.
Okay.
And still call it Battle High 2, because if I did a Battle High 3, I definitely would want buy off from the original IP owner, and I probably would want to do it in 3D. Because
nice.
I would want to have more. I think that's like one big thing is like I do not have the patience for sprite art and 2D art. Like I just don't have the patience for it, and it's I mean a lot of developers don't. That's why so many went to 3D. So that's sort of why I would want to do the next iteration in 3D somehow. Probably, I don't know 100%. Like if I could find a sprite artist who was like, no, I can help do the sprite work for all this, and I'd be like, okay, let's talk and get that working for a third game. But I just feel I have more agency if it's in 3D, so I can just kind of focus on that art. And there's a lot of different things that I think could be interesting in that art style for sure.
When you say Battle High and you want to like a second, are you talking like Battle High like in parentheses recess, or like Battle High after school session or something like that?
Well, the latest version is called Battle High 2 A+. And I was thinking of adding the word exchange to it because it's a tag game, so you can exchange, and then I'd want to add netcode to it, so that would be like, oh, you're exchanging between network. So that was my first idea, and I don't know if it's the one I settled on yet.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of weird little questions and challenges with it before I actually like jump into it, because
Mhm.
like there's one person in my Discord, for example, is like, I don't want to buy it again, and I'm like, well, if I add a lot of stuff, like maybe, and then it's like a weird like, well, how much would I charge for it? And then there's some voice actors that I probably want to recast and things
Mhm.
like that. So it's very much a like, it almost sounds like a good opportunity for a crowdsourcing thing,
Mhm.
because I could be like, okay, I'm using this crowdsourcing to see if there is interest in me doing more work for it, and if it doesn't, then I can be like, okay, there's not a lot of interest, I will move on to something else, and that's fine. Because that, like, obviously the money you get from a crowdsourcing, like Kickstarter or something, is like the main goal, but there's also that secondary goal of like, are people even interested in me doing this? And if so, or if not, then I can just go, okay, I will move on.
I'll buy it from you. I'll let you know. If you ever do, you got one purchase guaranteed. Actually, I want to touch on something you just mentioned there, Matt, and that is netcode. Um, what is your opinion on the state of fighting games and with how we need online so important? Like how important online is now?
I think it's always been important since like the first day, like the first game that had online. Like you were like, yeah, this should be in every game, because now I don't need to organize a bunch of people to come over or go somewhere to play games with other people. Especially with like the way, that in some places arcades don't really exist.
Yeah.
That's one reason why I've never really had a big fighting game scene growing up, is there was one arcade that I could drive to, and by the time I was old enough to drive somewhere by myself, it was practically on its way out. It
Yeah.
had like one or two fighting games in it, and it was just mostly just like claw games otherwise.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to have some level of online in your game. But of course, there is always the argument that if you can't do the online well enough, you shouldn't bother. That's why Battle High doesn't have online, because I
Mhm.
had no idea how to do it. And there was a forum, I forget, maybe it was the old Shoryuken forums, I don't remember. Someone said if you can't do online well, don't even bother. And I was like, yeah, that's a good point. And I just didn't bother because I knew at the time I had no idea where to even start.
I know there's tons of people that will parsec everything now. So like, with the invention of parsec, I know a lot of people have gone back to a lot of those old school games and are doing wonderful with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the parsec thing is kind of interesting, because I feel like there's this mix where I'm like, well, why does it matter if this game doesn't have rollback? Just like, why don't you just parsec it? Everything else
Mm-hmm.
is doing parsec. And then there's some people that are like, no, parsec is terrible. I hate it. I have known there have been tournaments that have been like falling apart because of parsec drama. Like it just doesn't
Yeah.
isn't working for somebody, or it crashing and all these things. So, I mean, I was able to play Thrill Kill on parsec, so I thought it was kind of cool. But I could see for a competitive setting, maybe it's not, perfect,
Yeah.
and still not quite there.
I think that the whole idea of rollback netcode is a very controversial topic, especially if you're like if that's your only way of playing. I
Mm.
know a huge amount of friends that like they're never going to go to a tournament in real life ever, absolutely ever, but they enjoy playing fighting games, and they only want to do it online, and certain they that's why they kind of get stuck playing the same few games because other the options aren't out there. You know what I mean? A lot of them stick with like Mortal Kombat because they have like one of the best onlines. It's easier for them to do that because they're never going to go to a tournament, and
Mm.
they also have an Xbox, so they can't play with their friends over on PlayStation. So it's like it's a very interesting state of. Is the issue just online, or is it that certain developers don't want to like cater to a broader audience? It's a really there's so many extra points to it. um, like I would love to play Street Fighter with some of my buddies, but he doesn't have a computer or a PlayStation. He only has an
Mm.
Xbox, so that means I have to go back and play Street Fighter 4, and that netcode's even worse. So like it becomes a challenge of not only having the right game, making sure the online works. If the debate if delay based versus rollback. It's been a very interesting topic, and I'm just grabbing everyone's opinion on it now, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's important and to do it well. Especially like we just had a global pandemic where it's like people couldn't go out for months to
Yeah.
a year, and still some people aren't going to want to go out. Some people are still very cautious. I mean, I'm included in that to a degree.
Hmm.
So like not being able to play multiplayer games online feels definitely like not a great thing. And I mean, again, rollback versus delay, it's kind of like fighting games are, I mean, people are still like, people are had a whole, I forget the numbers, but there's that whole chart about like DNF dual and different values on different consoles with just the input lag locally.
Mm-hmm.
So like now you add that to the network latency, and it's like that's even worse. So like of course you want it to be responsive, and I feel, you know, it has delay in the name, so delayed based obviously does not seem like the best choice. But I understand that the challenges of implementing it, you got to do it from like day one practically, and there's a lot of headaches and a lot of game engines don't really work with it from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of work you got to do to kind of get that up and running, and a lot of weird hacks that don't really work with the traditional way those engines work. And then crossplay is its own other thing. I don't even really know how crossplay works. Last time I heard, it's actually more of a like publisher licensing thing than just like, oh, we just, you know, flip the crossplay switch. It's like, no, you need like approval from Sony and approval from Microsoft and approval from whatever else to make sure they can act like the devices can communicate, because there's all kind of security loopholes and blah. Like it's definitely more of a, like, obviously there are development challenges in it, but there's definitely also like publisher things. So I almost feel like rollback is, I don't want to say easier, but I feel like there's more paperwork and legal things involved with crossplay than rollback. So that it, for some developers it's harder. I could see getting crossplay working and up and running.
100% agree with that. I actually have one other. Well, you know, I'm talking to some other people that are making games, and that's trying to discuss rollback netcode and crossplays is it's something hard to stomach right now going forward. But I know that's I think in the next decade or so, I think it's going to be a lot more commonplace. Right now, you can kind of slide by with crossplay as long as the internet's okay. But speaking of other people I know, you work with quite a few other indie developers. How'd you become the guy that's helping everyone, Matt?
Well, I'm helping everybody, but just like reaching out on Discord and like showing my stuff off on social media. You know, people see it and they're interested. And just chatting with people. Like Drag Her, for example, is another one I'm working on. That they just had a posting on a website looking for a technical designer, so I just applied to that. But yeah, I'm working on that, and then 3 other projects currently.
Mm-hmm.
Those I don't know if I can say because of NDA stuff, so I'll just say it's 3 other projects. It used to be 4, but I had to unfortunately drop the one, just because of time.
Oh, I can totally understand not having time to do things. Do you? It must be a little bit of a challenge, though, right? Like working on one game, then moving to the next, then moving to the next.
Yes, it definitely. I mean, the fact that they're all fighting games definitely helps because there's a lot of concepts that kind of go between them. But there's definitely a lot of like the biggest challenge is just like a time management thing. It's just like, okay, I got to work on this one this day, this one the next day, and then I have to work on Merfight for a little bit, and like making sure I balance, you know, other things and my full-time job. So it's definitely a challenge for sure.
Do you feel like that helps you in a way, like being able to see all these different systems? It has to give you ideas for your own game, right? Like seeing how.
Yeah, like definitely seeing other systems for sure. Definitely like, oh, this is an interesting way to do that I have not thought of, and then, you know, keeping that in mind for future things. Or yeah, definitely, it's definitely a good learning experience. And just like, because not all of them are 2D fighters, so just seeing like, oh, the way they work in other genres is always interesting too.
Awesome. Is there any certain like systems that you want to work with that you've like know of that you just haven't been able to like sink your teeth into yet?
I haven't gotten a chance to work on a like Tekken-esque or Virtua Fighter-esque 3D fighter, and that's something I've been really itching to do. Like I have a prototype started, and I'm like kind of liking it. I have some interesting ideas to kind of, you know, answer that really difficult, like how is your game different than what's out there, which is probably the hardest question to answer when making any game really, but especially a fighting game. So that's the one I haven't really gotten to sink my teeth in to.
I would say putting the Merfight characters in a 3D fighter in that aspect sounds awesome. Like I would love to see that. I would love to see Gamma like do the flip or the basketball throw dunk. That sounds kind of awesome if that actually happened in 3D. While we're talking about Merfight, can I ask what came about, or why did you choose mermaids or the aquatic theme? How did that happen?
Oh, that happened for, well, two things. One is I really like Rakuo from Darkstalkers. I think it's a really cool character. So I was like, I want to
Okay.
make a whole game based on this sort of character archetype design. But the bigger reason was, in an attempt to kind of stand out and be a little different, I felt a lot of games right now always, not always have the same thing, but they have very similar, like it's the year 20XX, everyone from a different country is fighting over something, usually a tournament. So I didn't want to do just like another Street Fighter, King of Fighters, Tekken-esque storyline and character archetypes. So I was like, oh, I like this aquatic theme. I want to do, instead of being like, this is a Chinese martial artist, you could be like, okay, well, how would a mantis shrimp fight if they were humanoid? Um, so like
That's clever.
bringing that together and like trying to figure that. And even now, like I look at the characters, and I know this is like feedback from my Kickstarters, like I still haven't taken the aquatic theme strongly enough, and I want to do that, for sure. I definitely think I could push that more. Um, and that's something I definitely want to do.
Okay. Like, do you have? Well, obviously, you don't want to give away your secrets in any way, but like, um, I I immediately think of like I don't know how much of Smash Brothers you've played, but the more recent version they actually added in like the story mode. There was a bunch of little weird effects you could add in, and I'm like thinking of like it is in water. You could have like the density of the water. People can move a little bit slower depending on the map and stuff like that from the water you're swimming through and stuff like that. That was something that I thought of would have been a nice little addition or like a side game or something. That was something I thought of. I don't know. Take it or leave
I
it.
the funny thing is that was like a lot of feedback early on. There was this, it was kind of like, oh, they kind of just feel like more like people with, body paint than fish people. And I was like, all right. And my one thing, and there is like, I have like goofy, like deep lore reasons why some of the stuff is the way it is. But I was thinking, it was like, oh, it could be kind of funny to do like a Merfight Alpha type thing and do like, okay, now there is water and there is like underwater and they
Mm-hmm.
have tails and there is like, they fight underwater and like how would that feel, and experimenting with that. And I have thought of, like, the game is in early access, so I'm focusing obviously on like features that need to be completed, but there is
Mm-hmm.
always like, will I get time to add new things? And it's like, it's always a possibility, depending on, where I get with it, for
Yeah.
sure. I do think the definitely future characters I have planned or would like to do, that I've written about previously, definitely like, okay, these are definitely taking the aquatic theme more extreme in the future. And I could definitely see like going back to existing ones and adding more moves and things that kind of push that a
Mm-hmm.
little bit.
All right. Well, I will say it's I immediately thought it was clever because you're right. Everyone kind of is doing the same thing when it comes to fighting games. It's a tournament. That's it. And there's not like I guess Skullgirls is like it's the battle to save everybody. This one big evil monster. Like I guess every now and then there's something new. But I thought Murphy had a very a lot of creativeness to it. I give you a lot of credit when it comes to the story, which I know a lot of it's still being unfolded as we speak. We're only like finding out through like dialogue, I guess, right now still. But it was this has most of the story been written before you finish the game, or are you still developing stuff now?
Still developing like fine details. Like there's some character motivations that I'm like, ugh, I don't really know which one to go with,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. But their overarching like theme and goal is, or yeah, the overarching story is kind of like there and in my head and mapped out. It's just trying to figure out how to implement it for story mode in a way that is not, like, I know some people don't care about story mode, so I'm not gonna like go like super stressed about it, but I at least want to make it sure that the people who enjoy those types of modes don't like hate it.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely don't have the budget to do like the MK or the Mortal Kombat cinematic story mode type
Yeah.
thing, which personally I don't even really like anymore. It was like cool the first time, and then they just got longer and longer, and it's just like, okay, I get
Yeah.
it. They're not bad. They're just not for me at the moment.
Jess would be screaming at you right
Yes, she would.
now.
Yes, she would. She would not be happy with that. But Injustice 2 had a cutscene so long it put my console into not sleep mode, but like darkened screen mode. And I was like,
I think I know exactly which one you're talking about.
I was like, that seems a little long if my console's like, you're not playing anymore, right? And it's just like, oof. But yeah, definitely gonna not go with that approach for my story mode. But my main thing is I feel like I know you got to be quick with the story delivery. It's a balancing act, and you kind of have to know like how long people are going to tolerate before doing the next match. And I think the first Blaze Blue had some decent story mode cuts. I kind of liked that, but there were moments where it was very long. Some of the between match things, for sure.
When it comes to I guess is there? You just mentioned Blaze Blue. Are you going for like interaction cutscenes with 3D models, or are you doing the whole like their character slides up and there's text underneath? You know what I mean? Which way do you prefer, I guess, or what's your vision for Merfight?
What I'd love to do is sort of do you remember Street Fighter Cross Tekken windscreens? This is a really silly one.
I do.
Kind of like that.
Okay.
That's what I'm hoping. Like 3D model changes its emote depending on the line it's saying, and that's really about it. Pretty fast, not a ton of lines depending on the cutscene. Maybe some like pre-rendered art for like a specific thing that is happening, because it's not just two characters talking. But yeah, I definitely don't have the I definitely don't want to do just like 2D visual novel style. As much as I'd like that, I'm not working with a 2D artist full time to kind of get that art generated. So I have to somehow figure out what to do with the 3D models for sure to kind of get that working.
I just played DNF Duel, or have been playing DNF Duel, getting ready for the Invitational, and man, I'm so over the 2D visual novel and fighting games. I'm so over I'm hoping for people to go forward to just find something new or more creative, I guess. You know what I mean? I'm trying to find something new, because just seeing text scroll, like, especially when there's like, I don't know, if I have to press the A button more than 10 times, you did something wrong. You know what I mean?
That's kind of how I feel. It's like, with a few exceptions for like a very long and like or important thing, you should be able to always skip it. Just be like, if you really want to read this, I like what I ever forget what Soul Calibur did it. I don't want to say the first or second one. They just had the thing with like, hey, if you really want to learn about this, you unlock the gallery thing, and it's like 5 paragraphs, and if you want to take the time to read it, go take the time to read it one day, but you don't have to do it. You don't have to read, this long story mode thing if you don't want to. And I kind of want that kind of thing. Like, I will admit, Merfights is going to be probably a little more on the visual novel side, but I want people to be able to skip it if they don't really care, and then rewatch it later. That's another one. I feel like there's a lot there. You just can't really rewatch it easily.
Yeah.
Which is always annoying, but yeah, just, and then like, it shouldn't be a ton of button presses, just enough to say like, hey, these are the two characters talking, why they're going to fight, and that's about it. And then endings, maybe you can do a little bit longer, or like pivotal, like middle of the game things, you can kind of do something a little longer, but not more than like 20 button presses. And again, should be able to skip it. Like
if it's a really dope cinematic, like right before the final boss, I'm like, yeah, go off, do whatever you want here. Like, it's the ending, do whatever you want. That's awesome. But you just made the comment about the it is always a headache to go watch like the ending of a story mode. Like, galleries are always kind of a hassle to find within the options or settings. You just made a comment that I may make a video about now. Thank you for that. Okay, so my next question here is, what are some challenges that you face getting ready to go into early access for Merfight?
So obviously just, working on the game solo has been the biggest challenge. I think the other one is, I always kind of joke that I actually think making games is kind of easy, quote unquote. It's selling games that's really hard. So a lot of the challenges I have faced has been marketing related, finding players, getting players interested, especially because I'm a solo dev, and I like doing 3D art, but I know my art is not as good as a team of however many artists are working on, Street Fighter 5 and 6 and King of Fighters, whatever. My art's not going to be as good, and I think that's kind of one of my, I don't want to say biggest mistakes of Merfight, but definitely one of the biggest challenges has been not taking a proper pre-production cycle and figuring out an art style that I can achieve and feel confident in, as opposed to going with the one I, kind of went to. Because like Merfight kind of was like a tech demo. I was like, oh, I got my netcode stuff working. That's really cool. And then it kind of just snowballed into like a full thing that I'm, enjoy working on. But there's definitely been some challenges for sure. So I think like the biggest challenges has just been making the presentation to a level where people will want to try it, and then finding those people who would want to try it for sure, I think has been the biggest challenge. Because like right now, for example, I'm working on environment art, and that's not my strongest suit. And I tried finding a 3D artist. I had one for a little bit, but they had to unfortunately back out. No hard feelings, it happens, but like I just have not been able to find a replacement. So I'm like, screw it, I gotta do it myself, and I gotta try to find a way to do it where it's interesting still, but like I know, yeah, they're not going to be the most beautiful background art in the genre, and I just kind of have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. Is that because there's just a lack of people in the industry right now, or just?
Yeah, it's a combination of a lot of things, and everyone's gonna have different answers for sure. For me, first of all, part of it is cost. I'm a small indie developer. I don't have a giant $1 million budget, so I cannot, hire. If I could hire an artist full time, it probably wouldn't be the issue. But I do not have the capability to hire someone for a living wage, which is, very important for this industry. I don't want to like, hire someone on minimum wage to make stuff. That's not cool.
Yeah.
For sure. So that's one of it. So I think that, and I also find a lot of artists I find have their own ideas and their own games they want to make. So it's very hard sometimes to convince someone to work on your game per se. You have to really have a lot of vision and leadership skills and a lot of things that, I tend to work solo on my side stuff. So some of that stuff I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to do this myself. I'm not going to take the time and the effort to try to convince people to work on my thing, because at that point too, it also slows me down because I'm just like kind of waiting on people and like waiting on things to go forward, and I'd rather just do it myself. But I think in the future, if I ever did get to a point where I could hire somebody, I definitely think there's plenty of people out there willing and able to. I just think when you're on a lower budget, it's just challenging, and you want to do it right and you want to do it fairly. So you don't want to just, have people work for you for free.
Yeah, I definitely can relate on the content creation side. Like, there's so many times that I could just get someone to just like edit something for me while I'm doing something else, or like while I'm like recording something, have someone just do quick research or just set up my overlays for a stream or something, like small little tedious things that like I'm not the best at. So when I do it, it just takes longer. You know what I mean? I can relate to that massively. Like, but especially when you're I'm very small in comparison to like some really big content creators. I can relate to like wishing I had the extra funds so I could like give someone a real wage so they could help me out. So I can definitely relate to that. Okay, next up is the future of Merfight. Do you have anything in store in the next year? Or like, I know we've kind of discussed it briefly. I know you don't want to spoil anything, but do you have like a roadmap at all planned out for Merfight, or is just something that, or are you already planning on maybe something after?
So I would say the long-term thing is I'm still in early access, and I'm going to be in early access. Hopefully I can leave early access by like April or May of 2023. And then after that, and for me, leaving early access in my mind is like, you don't really touch the game for a bit. You like, obviously you talk to communities and you talk to players and stuff and try to get people to play it. But I don't like do like a bunch of patches every other week like I'm doing now. Like right now I'm doing a patch like every month, or at least every other month I'm trying, with new features and content. Sometimes like there's been character, I don't want to say overhauls, but like big character changes. So for me, leaving early access would be like, okay, I'm not really doing that, and I'm working on another game, or I'm working on new characters for Merfight and new, story mode, single player content, whatever. I would love if I could double the cast by the time I, wash my hands of it and call, oh, it's done, like get to 24 characters. And I would also love to look into console release. I don't know which ones. Xbox One is probably, or Xbox, whichever they have now, Um, Probably the easiest because I did Battle High on Xbox One, so I'm pretty sure it'd be a similar process.
Hmm.
Um, I think Switch would be cool. Um, but then again, Switch for a fighting game always feels a little questionable because
Yeah, I was just about
not
to say
not
that.
many people have Wi-Fi on Switch, so that's a little questionable. PlayStation, I feel as a solo indie is just not approachable. I think unless I have a publisher to work with, I don't see it being very viable.
Yeah.
Um, and that's I mean, I had a friend actually yesterday was talking. They were like, "Oh, you should like try to pitch this," and I'm like, I kind of feel like to pitch a game properly, it's the kind of thing you need to do from day one. You need to be like, here's my pitch, here's my budget, here's how I'm going to present it to publishers. And I just didn't, I wasn't going in with that mindset with Merfight. So now it's like, oh, it's mostly
Hmm.
done. I don't really feel like dealing with it. And apparently publishing fighting games and pitching them to like smaller indie publishers is very difficult because a lot of them just are like, oh, fighting games, blech, we don't know what to do with this.
Yep.
Even if it is cool, it's a very challenging genre to pitch
Um.
around, apparently. And I feel if I ever were gonna do like publishing, I would try to do it from the ground up and be like, okay, how is this different and how is it gonna stick out and how is it? Oh, it's okay, that's a fighting game. Here's why. Or just be like, it's a different genre. I have a fighting game RPG thing I'd love to do at some point. That I still don't even like calling a fighting game RPG, but it's one of those like it's an RPG, but if you play fighting games, it will click a little more than not. But I still don't want to present it that way because it would scare people. If I say, "Oh, it's a fighting game," they're like,
Yeah.
"Well, is it gonna have X, Y, Z?" And it's like, no, it's not. But
An action RPG is how you need to
yes,
promote it. Um, every developer I have ever spoken to has said those exact words. That every publisher is like, "Ooh, fighting games were good." Like, like it's so hard to break into the scene. Like, Skullgirls and Main Six had to pretty much become their own developers to like even be able to like get into like be seen. It's I don't know what it is. I wonder if it's just a fear to jump into fighting games. I don't know exactly what these publishers or minds are going through. Like,
I would love to hear from those publishers. Just be like, why exactly? And for me, I feel like I well, there's a lot of things I could think of, but I do think the numbers that they sell often don't like work with the cost that it takes to do that kind of publishing work. I could see. So I think there's a fear that they're not going to get a return on their investment, and it's
yeah,
because, and with every genre, because apparently racing games have the same problem, like especially like realistic racing games have the same problem, and it's because you have a very dedicated audience that is very critical if something is awry. I mean, even DNF Duel feels like it has a little bit of that now. There's that little bit of a discourse going on around it.
100%. I even have my own gripes with it so far, but I think I guess we are. You are right. We're an extremely passionate genre. Like we want things. You know what I mean? Because we see all these other genres getting what it feels like everything and more. You know what I mean? Like I'll look at like I just saw. I didn't even know Indiana Jones is coming to Fortnite. I'm like, what? That's like one of my favorite movies as a kid. Like that's one of my all-time favorites. Now I'm gonna have to go play a shooting game to go see and play one of my favorite characters in fiction. Like it just seems like all these other genres get all the fun. You know what I mean? And then fighting games are always on the back burner, but it's my favorite genre. So it's this weird like in the middle. And it's not just that either. It's like RPGs get this all the time. Other action games, I just feel like they get more love or more appreciation. Like even at the Game Awards, if you get an example, Jeff Keighley doesn't talk about fighting games. You know what I mean? I was actually shocked Street Fighter even got mentioned at the Game Awards at Summer Game Fest this year. So it's I don't know. It does excuse my French, but sucks that we're like such a small genre. I didn't know about the racing thing though. Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah, it's something, and I don't think it's all racing games. I think it's very realistic racing games. It's why you don't see a lot of like Gran Turismo and Forza type. You don't see a ton of them. There's like those two are like the big known ones, and there hasn't been a Ridge Racer for years.
Yeah.
Like it's just things like that. Like that apparently is another tough one. It's I don't know if it's as tough as fighting games, but I've heard that there are similar genres within the space that publishers have that same apprehension to. For sure. And I definitely think the multiplayer aspect is part of it. I think especially the fact that most of them are only 1v1, unlike MOBAs and other games that you can have a lot of people playing at once.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of little things that I don't even know how you really fix them. Like there's no it's like, oh, we fix it. It's like, well, then it's not a fighting game anymore because you have changed it so much.
Yeah.
You have that problem.
I know that, like, at least for our genre, the barrier of entry is the number one reason why people don't come into fighting games, is they just feel like they're going to get stepped on immediately. And
yeah.
I think it's not that, if I'm going to be completely frank. I think people use saying it just the barrier of entry is too hard. I think just people don't understand that losing is part of succeeding. You have to lose to get better at things, and there's just every other video game out there rewards you for the bare minimum, while in fighting games it does not. So but this is philosophy. We're not talking about philosophy of fighting games right now. So my next question is, because we completely skipped over it when I joined with you earlier, is why do you like fighting games? Like, what was your origins with fighting games when you're younger all the way to now?
So I would say it's hard to know, because I know, like I said, there was an arcade near me. I would sometimes go there with, when my dad was in the mall with my mom. He would just like, oh, let's go to the arcade while she's shopping. And I would just watch people play stuff. I wouldn't really play. Primal Rage was in my arcade, the Mortal Kombat stuff. But I don't think I really started playing them until Blockbuster Video started having games you could rent. Mm. And I was renting, it's this weird little story. I used to rent this platformer called Plock for Super Nintendo. I rented it once and it was super hard. It made my sister and I super mad. And we returned it. And then a few days later, we wanted to rent it again because we didn't get very far. And my dad was just like, ugh, you're going to rent that stupid game again. That's going to make you all mad. And I don't know if it was an accident or if he swapped it without me knowing. But somehow I ended up with Mortal Kombat for Super Nintendo. Mm-hmm. And I was playing that, and I was like, wow, this is a lot more fun than than Plock. So that's, I feel like, the origin story, playing that for Super Nintendo. And then, like, friends having Street Fighter and playing with them and kind of just, like, trying all the weird little Super Nintendo fighters out there. The Ramna 1.5, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles tournament fighters, mm-hmm. What was another one that was Power Moves, which made me mad because you could only play the one character in single player.
Yeah, those games were the worst.
Yes, those always annoyed me. Where it's like, wait, I can play everybody in versus, but I can only play this one boring character in single player. That's upsetting. Yeah, but just a lot of that. I would definitely say, like, Super Nintendo, just like weird Super Nintendo fighters were definitely sort of where I started playing stuff. And it wasn't even competitive. I'm not a huge competitive player. I definitely identify more as a casual. I'm not gonna lie. I've won one Tattoo Assassins tournament, and I won awesome. I've only won like one Merfight tournament. I'm not even the best Merfight player. So, and and as a dev, I don't even really like entering Merfight, and it's not because I'm like, I feel it's very awkward when a dev enters their own tournament and wins, unless it's a dev team tournament, like, and everyone on the team is playing it. So I only have done that because, like, if there are less than 8 people playing, I'll be like, okay, I will join and pump this number up a little. But then if I lose, I get very salty. And if I win, it feels very awkward. But I learn a lot. The last tournament, I found like 2 bugs. I was like, oh, crap, this is why this feels like shit, and I need to fix it. Mm-hmm. So it's actually kind of good to play my own stuff. But going back to the original point, like, yeah, I and that's why I'm also big into, like, single-player content and story mode stuff. Like, I understand there's a balance of it, and I think it's important to have, like, yes, I know there's, like, I think it's a balancing act for sure. Like, I do get kind of frustrated when I see bigger games do these, like, big, lavish, like, Street Fighter V story mode annoyed me because it wasn't very good, and it was like, you could have improved the initial launch of the game if you just cut it. If you said, we're not going to do story mode, we're just going to do a better game at launch. So I'm not talking the, like, little, like, Bingus Art 3-panel story mode. I'm talking, like, that big cinematic thing they released later.
It was horrible.
That could have been cut.
So
that could have just been completely cut, and I would have been fine. Like, Street Fighter 3 doesn't have a big crazy story mode, and neither did 4. So, like, why did we need the Mortal Kombat clone for 5? That wasn't
that's exactly
that great.
Why they did it.
Yeah, and it's just that annoyed me, and I feel that's why I think, like, single single player content is important and being able to play a game, not always online, but you need to do a balance of it, and you need to understand that the core game itself is the important part first. Like, it is a fighting game. You need the systems and the mechanics and the characters and all that working first, and then you can do the sort of single player stuff. I kind of feel like, visuals and kind of bring players in and get them interested in the game or IP or whatever, and then the actual game being good keeps players there longer, and then story mode content kind of grows the brand so that people who like it can be like, oh, I want to play a sequel because I want to see where the story went with this game.
You actually have one of my favorite things in single player mode already in your game, and I spent most of my time doing that, and that's the combo trials. I don't think people give combo trials enough credit. That's like one I love labbing combos and being able to do that kind of stuff. In fact, you had them already, especially for an indie game. I think you're the first indie game I've ever played that had combo trials at launch. Well, early access, but still, like, that was so fun to me. I just sat there and just tried to get as far as I could until I couldn't do it anymore, because some of them were a little bit too hard for me. But I did it with all the characters. I think I'm also different compared to some other people of what single player modes can be. I actually think combo trials are part of single player mode. It's not part of just training mode is part of single player mode to me. Like, I love the fact of going into the training mode and learning combos and like practicing combos. That to me, I get the gratification, or I feel like I actually got my money's worth when I go into those modes. I've actually have gone into games and just done practice mode and realized, you know what, this game isn't really for me, but I was able to do this one sick combo. I'm okay with it now. Especially older games like Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I played it when it came out originally, but I bought it for my PC again, even though I know the netcode's horrible. But I went into the training mode. I got it for like $6 on the Steam sale, and then I just practiced combos for a couple hours, and I felt like I got my money's worth. And I think I just gotta say, having those combo trials was an absolute win in my book.
Yeah, I definitely back from Street Fighter EX. That was like, I think, my first memory of like a good combo trial thing, and I always enjoyed those. I always think there's a good mix of like learning a thing and then just doing cool, goofy stuff. Like, it's a good, fun mix, for sure. And I've always enjoyed those modes, and that's also why I added like the block and punish mode, like just different. Like, yeah, you're right. It doesn't need to be story. Single player is a lot of different things, and I definitely like try to lean into that for sure. Because I'm also a big component of trying to teach players how to play things.
Awesome.
Without tutorials. Like, I do tutorials obviously, but like the more you can teach without making it look and feel like a tutorial, the better. I actually think that's one other challenge of the genre too, is when people be like, well, you got to do the work. And it's like, some people are like, I just want to play a game. Like, I work already. Like, I don't want to make my entertainment avenue a second job. And that's not everybody. Some people love that, and some people love certain things. There are definitely, I think that's one challenge. Some people just don't want to feel like they're doing work. And I think that's the one challenge of tutorial modes, especially really long ones, is they just feel like work because there's so much reading and stuff you got to do. And they still don't prepare you for real matches.
Yep. I'm going to be completely honest. One of my least favorite things is when people say move forward 3 times to prove that you know how to move forward. Like, I'm just going to be honest. We don't need to do that anymore. The movement part of it, I don't think we need to do anymore. We don't jump.
You'd be surprised.
I don't.
I have been in playtest with like, hey, you're playing a platformer, and have gotten to like, well, how do I jump? And I'm like, it is 2012. What do you mean you don't know how to jump? It is what do you think?
You know what? I know there's like someone who's never picked up a video game in their life, and that could be their one time. But it's so hard for me to believe those people still exist.
I think that's another thing that people underestimate, the reality of, if I can't play this game within like not even 5 minutes, I feel 5 minutes is too long now. There's so many other things you can drop and go to. That's like the biggest challenge, and that is why I can understand why there is this sort of accessibility push for sure. I don't know if it's the perfect thing, and there are a lot of flaws with it. Merfight whole lenient input system thing is definitely a challenge, and I may eventually cut it or allow players to swap for sure. But like, there are people who are new to things, and if they can't pick it up quickly, they're going to go to something else because there's so much out there that they can go to.
Like I think I don't remember the character's name, but it was you had to use is it starts with the D, I think. It was a charge character, and I'm like, ugh, I've always hated charge characters since I was a little kid, and I'm like, I was able to get off like 2 of the combos, and I just remembered, I'm like, this was right around when Street Fighter made the announcement I think it was like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, where they said that they're gonna do simple inputs, and I'm like, that completely changes not having the charge mechanic for like say Belrog, right, or Balrog. Completely kind of changes because he's always like naturally blocking now. You know what I mean? Or same thing with Guile. He's always naturally blocking. With these new modern inputs that they're putting in games, I wonder if that's going to change some of like these classic characters. And I was thinking of it as I was playing your character, that you had to like use a charge motion to complete the combo, and I'm like, like the way you have it, I think is great. I didn't think, honestly, I didn't think it was I don't think you really had simple inputs. I thought they were regular inputs. Maybe I'm wrong, or I.
No, I do. It's kind of like it is similar to DNF Duel apparently.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that till someone explained it, but like you can do a traditional input and get a little bit of meter bonus, or you can just do like forward and a punch and not get the meter bonus, but it comes out more quickly, or just comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And then for some charge characters, like, oh, you didn't charge completely, it still comes out, but the properties are slightly different of the attack.
Okay.
So,
I see what you mean.
And the challenge I'm having though is because I don't have a unique special button dedicated to special moves. There are a lot of times where players are like, oh, I just wanted to crouch and kick, and now I got the uppercut instead. You know, so that's sort of the challenge I'm working with now. I'm trying to fix that. And there are some players who are like, can I just turn that off? And I was like, no, because then you're gonna accuse players of playing on easy mode, and I'm just like, I should just allow players to turn it off. I'm in early access, like who cares?
Yeah.
Well,
actually,
sure.
Who knows? Like maybe I've like this is the same argument I have with the block button. Like I've said this to everyone. Like there's people who scream at the top of their lungs that they don't want it. It's bad for video games. I just think a toggle button of having you being able to block and not be able to block is the way to go. Because like I personally enjoy blocking. Like I actually in Mortal Kombat 11 and Mortal Kombat 9 and MKX, I didn't like the block button. I just didn't like it. So I actually prefer holding back because I just feel it's cumbersome to hold down a button while you're like, you still have to naturally block anyways. You know what I mean? You still got to like block low or block mid and high, whatever. So I just felt it was easier just to block anyways. You have to learn it eventually. So, but if there's people who really feel they are more comfortable holding button, just give them an option. It should be as easy as when you pick your character. Would you like the block button on? Yes, no. As simple as that, you know what I mean? But I know a lot of people, traditionalists are very picky about that topic.
Yeah, that's a tough one for sure that we'll probably be dealing with on Drag Her.
Yeah, we already kind of got into that in the last podcast. Okay, so I had a question for you. I think I just lost it in my brain right now, but when you were just talking about that. But when it comes to Merfight, when you mentioned DLC, are there certain character archetypes that are in other video games or other fighting games that you've seen that you want to kind of in a way bring over to Merfight?
Let me think. I know one I'm afraid of trying, but I think it should be interesting to try is a puppet character. I know like puppet type things. So I was thinking how that would be interesting. And no, I don't have any two stance characters. I had a few ideas how to do that. But overall, I have a lot of grapplers in the game already, and I was like, oh, I have like 2 more grappler ideas. But that's kind of a tough one because you don't want to rely too heavily on existing archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
But I know Merfight already is. But definitely for like the if I get 12 remaining characters done, I can't really think of any off the top of my head that I would really want, like, oh, I need this type of character in the game, per se. Yeah. I'm trying to think of any. I know one person requested, they were like, I'd love a character with flight unflight like Magneto. And I was like, that could be cool, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm not going to promise anything.
You're gonna get
so
the
there's definitely
starfish character added, unless you're already working on it. I'll keep my mouth.
I did have a starfish character design at one time, a long, long time ago, but
Yeah.
it looked really stupid once I modeled it, and I was like, nope, I cut that. I could retry their design and make them look better,
Yeah.
for sure, but that was definitely one character idea out there.
Yeah. I guess this is very kind of hard with Merfight, but is there a possibility of guest characters in Merfight?
There are guest costumes. I already have like 2 of those, and I would love if I could get like every character have like one other indie game inspired costume from another dev. I think would be cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
But as for guest characters, I personally do not like guest characters.
Really?
Only from the legacy standpoint. Because once the next game comes out, that character's gone. So if you've been like, I'm a Geese player in Tekken, be like, you are probably not going to be a Geese player in Tekken 8. Good luck. And if you are, that'd be very surprising. And I think the only way to really solve that would be if in the next game, if they were like, okay, here is a character who plays exactly like them, but they are now part of Tekken's story and not a guest character. I understand the reasoning, the appeal from marketing, the importance from marketing, the tie-ins and all that, but like for Merfight, if I were to do a guest character, I mean, obviously there would have to be a lot of discussion and whatnot, and I don't even know what it takes to get a guest character in a game. I imagine it is a ton of contract work and a ton of lawyers and agreements and headache that I don't feel like dealing with. But if I were to ever do a guest character in Merfight, it would be interesting for sure. And I would probably they would just be a Mer version of a character, or just, I don't know. I feel like they'd be very out of place. The only one, it would be really funny if some miracle happened. I was able to get Rakuo in the game, and I would just constantly make jokes that he's the only naked character. But I don't. I feel like that is a character that could work in the game systems wise. It would be pretty funny to try to implement, but I don't think I would do the character justice for one, because animation wise, I'd be like, oh gosh, this is going to be a nightmare to do some of the transformation he does, for sure. But I can't. But overall, guest characters, I'm just sort of like, they're very like, again, from the legacy standpoint, I'm kind of like, I'm not against it. Like if someone was to talk to me about it, and I'm definitely open to the conversation, but it's not my go-to. I'm not going to go out to anybody, I think, and be like, let me add so-and-so as a guest.
Yeah. I guess the one that came to mind was Orcane from Rivals of Aether, but I guess now thinking about it, that would be super challenging because that's a quadrupedal creature and you're like mainly like a humanoid game. That would be pretty challenging. It would be cool, but it would be challenging.
It actually would be. It's actually kind of funny because I was thinking about that, because I know Punch Planet, for example, has dog, and I'd be like, could I do a quadruped? And like, I know rigging wise and in my 3D work side, you could do that. Like just you have to just work with the bones a little differently, but it's still a humanoid. It's still 4 limbs, so they just don't stand on their back legs, or they could be like Kuma in Tekken and just kind of stand that way.
Yeah. Kuma's my main in Tekken. So I definitely understand the confusion with that. But he also he has moves. He's a stance character, so he does go on all 4s most of the time too. So I don't know. I guess I'm gonna reach out for you and try to get Orcane and Merfight now. That'd be awesome. Orcane's going into Frame Makers, I believe, too.
Yeah, I think I saw that. Yeah. There was an indie game, I forget the name of it, that was gonna have Jada from Battle High in it. Unfortunately, I think that has kind of frozen, but that was an interesting crossover that was gonna happen at some point.
That'd actually be really cool if you can like throw some Easter. I'm sure you probably already have it. I just haven't realized. Do you have any Battle High Easter eggs in Merfight?
Not yet, but I was thinking of doing something.
Okay.
Eventually.
That's pretty dope. I hope I figure it out. Don't tell anyone. That's gonna be one of those things we find out like in 2 decades. Like, holy shit, Matt put this in the game. All right, so we've been talking for a little over an hour now. I got a couple things. First off, where can people find you, Matt?
They can find me mostly on Twitter, through Mattrified, just at Mattrified. That's probably the easiest place, and then, that's the easiest place.
Okay.
I always think there's a bunch. It's like, no, just Twitter at this point. I mean, I have a Discord, but there's a I think it's just discord.mattrifiedgames.com will take you to the invite link for the Discord for both Merfight and pretty much all the games I've worked on, or self-published rather.
All right, and my final question that I always tell with this podcast is, what is the I usually say, what does the fighting game community mean to you? So I'm gonna have this a double question for you. What does the fighting game community mean to you, and what does Merfight mean to you? You can answer them in either order you'd like.
I guess I'll start with Merfight. Merfight to me is my first attempt at making a fighting game completely by myself, and things I'm learning to take to the next thing, whatever that is, is really valuable. So even though I know it's, people are like, oh my gosh, DNF Duel doesn't even have 5,000 players. I'm like, Merfight hasn't even broken 20 concurrent users. Like, what are you talking? Like, I don't, whatever. So, but for me, it's more of a learning experience. Like I said, it's a tech demo that started out as something. And I'm learning a lot of like, okay, next thing I got to do XYZ better, and I need to look into this more. But for me, it's really a passion project. The first time of doing a lot myself, like my own IP, my own character designs, me being in charge of myself and not just being like, here's all the character designs made, make them work. So that's sort of what it means to me. It's just sort of starting there. With that game for sure. And then I feel like there was another point I had to that, but I forgot it. Yeah, whatever.
We can always come back to it if you think about it.
if I rediscover it. And then as for the community, I have never felt super ingrained into it, admittedly. I know when I first went to EVO the first time in 2014, the only time, I really wanted to get integrated into it more. But the problem is, as a dev, I just work a lot and I don't have the time to go to locals and things like that. Like it's hard to find the time. So I've never felt super integrated into it. But I do feel it's a challenging space to really define because there are some really great people in it. A lot of the part of the Merfight community has been really great. A lot of good feedback, a lot of enthusiasm for the game, and it motivates me and makes me want to work on it. For sure, but at the same time, and not just related to Merfight, there's still a lot of challenging. There's a lot of challenge to it. There's a lot of strong personalities and a lot of just negativity around things still. That definitely makes the community kind of intimidating. I think is the best word. It's very intimidating at times to try to get people to take a break from playing what they love and try your thing. And hopefully they love it, or at least can tell you why they don't. But it's a very challenging in that regards. And I think like any community, I was actually very curious about the definition of community, because I was like, how much does the FGC kind of fall into that definition? And I definitely think it does. But like I think any community, there's still infighting, there's still a lot of headaches. There's still a lot of, disharmony, I could say. The people still argue if Smash is a fighting game or not. And it's like...
That's never going away.
It's never going away, and it's very tired, and just that kind of stuff. So, but at the end of the day, it's all about players who love, this sort of multiplayer, this aspect and this specific multiplayer genre. I don't even know if that answered it. I'm just kind of rambling. Overall,
I love this question because everyone has a different take on it. I've had people. Everyone has a different experience with FGC. Some people say it's family. Some people say it's community. Some people say it's their savior. Some people say it's their rival. Everyone has a different opinion of it, and I just love hearing everyone's opinion on it. So
yeah, it's for me, like, I think the biggest challenge for me as a dev is the idea that yes, I'm selling a product, I'm selling a thing, and it's very difficult to convince people who are so passionate to try something, even if it's not that different, even if it's just a little different, or if it's really different. It's very difficult to do that. But when you find people who like what you're working on, that's sort of when it works really well. And if you can do that, then the community you make for your own game exists in that space, and it can kind of just slowly grow. And I think that aspect of it is great.
I agree. I think it's similar in terms. I think that's why tournament organizers work so hard as well. A lot of TOs I know, like what you just said, if you can get the few people that this are so thankful for what you're doing and they really love your product or the tournament you run, those few people just make it worth it. You know what I mean? And yes, there's those 3 people are the best. They make everything, but there's probably like 7 other guys that are the worst. But you're doing it for those 3 other guys, and that's what really matters. So, but yeah, that was a great answer. Thank you, Matt. Matt, thank you. I think that's it. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yep, thanks for having me. Oh, and I think I remembered what I was going to say.
Okay, let's do it.
There are 3 tournaments for Merfight coming up in July. There is Indie Breakdown, which is next Friday, the 8th, I believe. Then there is the ACP Gaming on Tuesday Throwdown on the 12th, and then there will probably be another community Kumite around the 24th of July.
And anyone can sign up for those, right?
Yep, as long as you have a decent internet connection, obviously, because they will all be online tournaments.
Beautiful. That's good to know. I know a couple people who have Merfight. I will see what we can do. I'll try to grab some of my squad to go out there. But Matt, once again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Deuces. Make sure you go follow Mattrified on all social media channels that he mentioned. For those that don't know, I stream on Twitch every Sunday and Tuesday. Come and hang out. I also have an FGC TikTok account you totally should be following. You can check out the podcast on my YouTube channel and, of course, here on Spotify. If you liked the video today, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. My name is Phil, and, of course, I'll talk to you guys soon.